Welcome to Paperweights, the podcast where two self-proclaimed gym rats and shooting enthusiasts delve into the world of literature with a sprinkle of humor. Although their biceps could crush a walnut, don't let that intimidate you. They also have a nerdy side. Mike and Brandon have a voracious appetite for reading, particularly in the fantasy genre, and they want to share their passion with you. So grab your protein shake and your favorite novel and join us for a humorous and insightful journey into the world of books with Paperweights.
Welcome back to another episode of the Paperweights. I'm your host, Brandon, and today I'm joined by
Hi, I'm Emily.
Emily. It's great to see you. How are you?
I'm well. How are you today?
I'm doing good. So this episode is going to air the weekend of Father's Day. So, um, with that, I know our sponsor, Mudcat Whiskers, he's off on vacation for the month of June. But if your dad has a beard or mustache or anything and needs to take care of it, they can hook you up over there at mudcatwhiskers.com. Um, I know, Emily, you have a coconut allergy, so some of their products, I think their beard balm um, might have. I think the beard balm has coconut oil in it. I don't think the wash or the conditioner or the oils do. And if you are allergic or sensitive to scents, they also have an unskinned, which is an unscented line of products. And then for the majority, I think almost all of the scents, he does sell soy candles as well, with a little woodwick, uh, a crackling woodwick in it. So those are fun. So if you're interested in buying any of those things for your father, it might be a late Father's Day gift. But you can head on over to mudcatwhiskers.com and use the code paperweights to save you 15% at checkout. So, Emily,
Hi.
it's great to see you.
Good to see y'all as well.
And you are my friend,
Yes.
by extension of being married to my other friend, Alex.
Yes.
So, um, you want to tell the listeners, viewers, a little bit about yourself, kind of your connection to Harry Potter as well, maybe reading or education?
So, my name's Emily. I've known Brandon for several years now. I've always been a fan of Harry Potter. Uh, I came out, I started reading it, I believe I was about 7 or 8. My mom started reading it to me. And I just remember it was just one of those kind of magical things that just kind of made me feel a little bit more understood and a little bit more not accepted, because I never really had that feeling of true unacceptance, but it just made me seem a little less out of the ordinary. It was just like, well, there's just this fantastical world where everyone can find some sort of acceptance. I know that there's some issues now with that, but at the time there was not. And I have a distinct memory of my mom reading the first book to me, and it was one of the first times in my life that it ever snowed down here. We were in the middle of a chapter and suddenly my brother comes rushing in saying, "It's snowing, it's snowing." So it just always felt a little bit more magical to me, felt like magical things could happen while reading the books. I reread them periodically. They just have that sense of nostalgia and just sense of kind of childlike wonderment to them. Um, and I love the books, I love the movies, and I love them as separate entities. I try not to compare the two because they're obviously two very different um, works. But also, he's waiting for me to say I did have a Harry Potter themed wedding. Um, I It's just something that brings joy to my life, and it makes me feel better. So that is my connection to Harry Potter.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, this is my only my second time reading it, and like the first few, so the first few I'd listen, I would put the audiobook on sometimes while I was at work or doing some things. So it was on. But for me, audiobooks, I don't have, it's not as deep of a read as if I'm sitting there with a book. A lot of times is, oh, I catch, like I'll listen in for 5, 10, 20 minutes and go, oh, okay, this is this is what's happening. And now I know where I'm at in the story. And my brain starts to fill in what I know about the story and go, oh yeah, okay, that happened. But I'll miss all those little things that, you know, aren't in truly integral to the story. They might be Easter eggs or they might be, small foreshadowing pieces, um, which I will pick up on a reread if I'm sitting there with the actual book. Because unlike some people, I actually, when I'm sitting there reading a book, my mind actually goes and reads every single word, every to, every and, every I, every an, you know, every preposition, every article, every verb, every adjective, everything. So I get a good deep read whenever I have a physical book in front of me, either physical or, I've been doing the e-readers a lot lately, and they work out really well for the podcast because I can just highlight and make notes right there without having to set down the book, hold the book in one hand and try to write with the other hand and kind of look and copy down the actual words in the book if I wanted just to highlight. Because I don't like writing or highlighting in a physical book. I'm just
No, it
very
destroys the book.
exactly. And I don't fold the front back either. And it creeps me out when people do it, but I'm like, okay, if that's not my book, then hey, you do what you want with your book, but I'm not going to lend you a book. So, um, yeah, I discovered that a lot of what happened, especially in these later books, I don't, I didn't remember like what happened. So a lot of that mystery is still there, although there are points where there's some foreshadowing that immediately kick in my memory and go, oh, okay, now I solved it, which wouldn't have happened the first time I read it. So it's not like a completely blank slate of rereading, but it still is, there's some mystery of that. I'm also experiencing that with another series that I'm rereading, which is a Brandon Sanderson. And so it's the second era of the Mistborn novels. And I read them once, except, so there's four in that one. I read the first three of those once already. And I just finished the reread of the third this morning. Um, and I was like, yeah, I don't remember a lot of this happening, but this is still magical. Like that sense of, we often, I don't know if you do, but I often myself, and I hear other people go, man, I wish I could go back and experience X without having experienced it before, just to know that feeling. But at the same time, we want to go experience that with not necessarily the same blank slate that we had before, but with a, oh, this is going to be awesome. There's going to be something there. And so it's going to affect our experience. We're not going to have the same exact experience.
Okay.
Um, Otherwise, it would be like, you know, you wouldn't know why you were experiencing it again. You'd have no idea that you were experiencing it again without having experienced it before with no memory. I'm getting lost. Um, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
No, I completely understand what you're saying. And especially now, I want to say I've read, sorry, the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I've read it at least 5 times. And the first time you read, especially a series, especially something that's been anticipated, you are just trying to race through it and find out what happens and figure out what's going on. You miss so many little things until you reread it. And sometimes you have to reread it a few times to truly catch every little thing that's happening. And you're like, oh, that's why they did this. Or, oh, they went here instead of here because of this reason. Like you catch so many more things upon a reread. And especially if, like, I think audiobooks are great for people who either just don't have the time to sit down with a book, or they don't really have the attention span to fully sit with a book. But you do miss a lot of details because with an audiobook, you're usually doing other things, you're cleaning up, you're working, you're doing something else. But when you're sit down with the book, you're focusing solely on that,
Hmm.
which is a gift of time that not everybody has these days.
Right.
So and I mean, yeah, the e-readers, they're great. You can keep them with you everywhere. If you're waiting in a doctor's office for 20 minutes, you can pull it out, read a few chapters, or it's much more accessible than the original books these days, which is sad because I love the original books. It's the weight of a book in your hands is such a great feeling knowing that what you're about to know. But yeah, it's I will say it's also very interesting because most people see Harry Potter as children's books, and I think that they are great books for children once they hit a certain age. But you reread them as an adult, and you're like, oh wow, some of this is way darker than I thought it was as a kid, especially as you get into the later, like the last, well, Goblet of Fire on, it gets very dark at certain points.
Yeah.
It's dealing with a lot of obviously coming of age stuff, but it's dealing with a lot of death and grief and trying to navigate a world where people aren't really helping you. So it has a lot of very adult themes in it, even though I don't know if that was fully intended by the author.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's a Chris and I got into some of the little things in book six. So book six is notorious for the love potion and just the flirting and the relationship building and all kinds of stuff. And we must have gone off for like 10-15 minutes on one of our episodes where we had the same maturity level as that section of the book we were discussing. So but yeah, you do mention physical books, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before with Chris, maybe Justin, and probably Mike. Um, Special editions of books are awesome. Like when you get them. So I've talked about the Brandon Sanderson secret novels that came out and how he had an artist for each one, and a lot of them at the bottom of the page or around the page there's little doodles and everything as you're going through, so it's just something extra to experience. And then there's some either half page or full page just artwork in the middle of it. um, One of my favorites that I have not gotten my hands on is the Never Ending Story, where, and I think they translated it into the English version, but the original German hardback special, I don't even know if it was a special edition, but the original German version, the text, the color of the text changed based on if Sebastian was in the real world or if he was in the fantasy realm, which the name of the realm escapes me. And so that's like something special. That's like you get something like it assists you in immersing yourself in the world, you know, as opposed to like the difference being, okay, if you go to the mall and there's a Disney store or a Harry Potter store, you you go in there and it's like, oh, this is cool, this is what I want. But if you go to um like Universal and you go into Hogsmeade or you go into Diagon Alley, and the line of sights are well, so you don't see anything else, you just feel like you're there, you're immersed, you're not there, but you
You
are
don't want to
there.
believe it.
Right. It assists. And I've got to say Disney World, like, or I've only been to I haven't been to Disneyland, but Disney World, and I've never been to Universal, but from what I see, it just does an amazing job of when you go there, you just feel like you're somewhere else.
Oh yeah, because when I went to the first time, well, the only time I went to Universal, it really was that, oh my God, I'm here type of feeling. Like the whole rest of the world is blocked out. It is truly a case of, oh, I have to go into Ollivanders. I have to go into the Leaky Cauldron. It's all these places that you recognize both from the books and the movies, but you're like, it's here. I can go in, I can see it, I can do the things. It's it's a great, I mean, Disney World and Disneyland are also very good at that, but I feel like you're just in like one little section at a time. So for that little time, like obviously like Haunted Mansion, you're like, oh, you're really in Haunted Mansion. But then you come out and it breaks and you go to the next thing. Whereas if you're spending time and they have the Dr. Seuss world, the Harry Potter world, and it's just so immersive and you blocks out everything else that you kind of you're able to suspend reality a little bit. Be like, no, I'm here. I'm at Hogwarts. I'm not in Florida in the middle of the swamp. Um, so they do a really good job with doing that. It's a very fun experience. But no, what because I don't know if you've seen them. I have the first five fully illustrated Harry Potter books.
I
They
haven't seen.
they've been coming out like an illustrator's been working with the books and they're fully illustrated. Like every page has illustrations on it. It helps, I think, especially for younger people to really visualize the story as it's happening.
Are those the ones that have some pop outs and different things in them as well? Because I've
They
seen
don't
some
have
of
pop outs. They're
those.
just fully illustrated.
Because I've seen there's some, I don't know if they have all seven out right now, but like the last time I was in Barnes and Noble, I saw some, um, and they're shrink wrapped, but they're bulging. Like the things are bulging because they have things on some of the pages where you open up and it becomes like some of the shops and in Diagon Alley and whatnot. And those are pretty cool.
Yeah. Though I've seen those. I feel like those are more like the making of or behind the scenes type of stuff for the movies. The ones I'm talking about, they're just like these beautifully illustrated. They're larger than the books and they're completely illustrated. So you get to see when you get in the first like with the first book, when you get to Harry's first Quidditch match, you see the Quidditch pitch. You're not having to try to picture it in your head of what it looks like if you haven't seen the movies. You get to see it. It
Cool.
helps like it really helps move the story along because this is a fictional world. Especially first time readers, they're like, well, what does that even look like? What is she describing? What's happening? You get to see it.
That's cool. All right, you want to jump into book 7 now?
Let's jump in.
All right, so we'll start with chapter 1, the Dark Lord Ascending. So first of all, I'll say this is yet another book where it starts off without it with a non-Harry point of view. I think the last two, well, Goblet of Fire technically didn't have a Harry point of view because it was the dream. And I know book 6 didn't have a Harry point of view on the first because that was the minister.
And the first one didn't either, because that was Vernon.
True. The the very first chapter was Vernon. I thought that
Mhm.
was Harry, not
The
Harry,
very first chapter was
Dumbledore.
Vernon, right before Harry gets dropped off on his doorstep.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so it looks like over half of the Harry Potter books don't start off with a Harry Potter point of view.
Yep.
But the majority of chapters in these books are Harry's
Yes.
point of view, either limited or omniscient. And I've talked about that with Chris and Justin before. So in this chapter, it starts off with Snape approaching Lucius's manor with Yaxley, which is just some other
And
Death
he's another
Eater.
Death Eater.
And the two of them, when they report to Snape, they give conflicting news about we don't know, or no, we actually do know, which is they're saying, okay, Harry, they're going to leave on this date, et cetera, et cetera. What we don't know is Snape's source. He tells Voldemort, the same source as before. We're like, who's that source? I still don't know. I don't think we found out in the first 10 chapters, and I don't remember. Oh, and so we try to for I'm treating this as a podcast that anybody that hasn't read the books can listen and follow along. So anything before, or rather, anything on the section we're talking about or before is open game. Anything after the last chapter of the episode we're on is hopefully off. Hopefully we remember not to discuss. Um, we find out that Yaxley is working on infiltrating the ministry and hopefully killing the minister and others. Then Voldemort humiliates the Malfoys, including Bellatrix when she brings up Tonks getting married to Lupin. So Bellatrix kind of thought she was going to get on Voldemort's happy side, get brownie points by kind of making fun of her sister and her husband and Draco. And then Voldemort's like, hey, no, your cousin or whatever married Tonks is their cousin, right?
So it's Bellatrix, Narcissa, and then Andromeda are the three black sisters. Andromeda is Tonks's mother.
Okay, so it's their niece. Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's like, hey, your niece married a werewolf. What do you think about that? And go ahead.
And and a lot of this you see because in a way he almost doesn't have to bring down the Malfoys. The Malfoys are already at rock bottom at this point, especially in society. And Bellatrix is such a staunch follower that anything he says, she's going to follow. He doesn't have to try to belittle them, but he does because he's Voldemort. And he uses it. You kind of find out a little bit in this chapter. He uses it for Narcissa and Lucius as like a you are beneath me kind of tool, but for Bellatrix as like a motivator. Like he knows what buttons to push on her to motivate her to be the worst possible thing she can be.
She desires that though. She is like she's a yes man
Okay.
to Voldemort. Like she's like, I just want to be evil. It's kind of like the Skeletor meme. It's like, I don't want to feel good. I want to feel evil.
Yes, but he uses that to like focus her because she's so crazy. She's such a loose cannon that he kind of uses it to be like, hey, I want you to focus your cruelty on this. Like, I am bringing this to attention. I am making you feel embarrassed and humiliated because of it. I want you to eliminate that.
That, I can see, I remember something that happens beyond this, and I agree. This is kind of like that foreshadowing. He's giving her a seed of something to focus on.
Yeah.
Something that is a problem for them. So then Voldemort forces Lucius to give him his wand. We'll find out why later. And the entire time that this meeting of the Death Eaters and Voldemort is happening, there's a body just floating above the table they're sitting at that's just kind of spinning around slowly. At first, we only got that it was a woman. Then at the end of the chapter, we've discovered that it's Professor Burbage, who was the professor of Muggle studies at Hogwarts. And she kind of comes to and sees Snape, and she's begging Snape to save her. Excuse me. And then Voldemort kills her and feeds her to Nagini. And those are the events in the chapter. So we can discuss anything that you thought of was important, or anything you wanted to discuss. One thing I do want to point out here is with Voldemort, just kind of the level of control that he has or desires, um, which I guess it's his drive for power is to have control.
Yes.
And so when he has the Death Eaters around the table, he tells each one where they are to sit in, around this table. So it's like, no, you're not sitting there, you're moving over there, and this person's sitting here.
Yeah.
And just being told for whatever reason he wants, right? So like I would imagine that most Death Eaters want to be as close, um proximally, and trustworthy, just like emotionally, uh physically close to Voldemort. So if he's just telling people where to sit, they're going to feel a jealousy against each other, which is very interesting. I find it very interesting that what makes so a lot of stories they'll have a team of bad guys, but they're only a team because, and most of the time they recognize this with each other, they're only a team because they just want to do bad things. They're not united with a sense of connection to each other like a good guy team is. And so what makes them dangerous is that they have a disregard for just about anything. They're chaotic. If we go to Dungeons and Dragons alignments, chaotic just means I'm neither, I don't care what happens. And so like I don't care who's caught up in it, and I'm not following any rules. And most of the bad guys, they are very chaotic. There's some that have some order to them, um, but they're dangerous because they don't care what happens to the person sitting next to the, as long as if they're not like Voldemort's the top, so everybody that's in his circle, they're stepping on each other. They're trying to push each other down to climb up.
Yes.
Whereas most of our good guys, they're like, well, we don't need one person. Like it's going to take sacrifice. So it's going to take sacrifice for one good guy to be at the top of the mountain. And it's almost going to be a last resort, as opposed to the three of them are going to, and when I say three of them, Ron, Harry, and Hermione, in this case, the three of them, if they're on a platform and they need to get up here, they're going to try to find a way to raise that platform so that they're all up there. Once they exhaust any options, then they might go, okay, which one of us has the realistic chance of succeeding up here? And they did that in the first book, right?
Yes. They have the whole conversation about how it has to be Harry that goes on in the first book,
Yes.
and that is a vital part of that story. But as we see throughout the rest of the books, they do work best as a team. So they do know that each of them have their strengths and that they need to continue together. Um, at least typically Hermione and Ron realize this. Harry gets into his own head sometimes. But because yeah, we see this, and once again, it brings it back to Bellatrix is so willing to throw her sister and her family under the bus because it helps her climb up, supposedly, in the eyes of Voldemort. Voldemort's real quick to be like, no. But typically, you do in little things throughout the previous books, especially with her escape from Azkaban, you do sort of realize that she is one of the people who's more in his inner circle and maybe knows a little bit more than he wants her to know. So he kind of feels like he always has to keep her in her place. But in it's his need for control, I mean, I don't ever want to justify anything Voldemort does. But you do see in the sixth book, we do have kind of that flashback of Dumbledore finding him in an orphanage.
Yes.
So much of his childhood had no control. So it does make sense why he is seeking such power and such intense control in his adult life, or whatever Horcrux life he's got. But it does make sense as a character why he's seeking that. And he does have some of those like cult leader tendencies, because he talks a lot about when he's saying that he needs to be the one to kill Harry in this chapter. He's talking about like, it's my mistakes that led me to not be able to kill him this far. He's kind of being self-depreciating for a little bit, almost trying to endear himself to his followers a little bit more. He doesn't really believe that it was his own mistakes. He
No.
believes that it's everybody else's mistake on the planet as to why he's not been able to kill Harry Potter. But he's using that tactic of, oh, he's struggling. He knows his own faults. He doesn't. But it's endearing his followers to him. And we're seeing, I mean, you see it in the chapter at first when he's asking for that he needs a wand. No one's volunteering. No one, not even Bellatrix, is saying, oh, use my wand, use my wand. He has to take it, and he's taking it from the only person that he knows has something to lose. Because Lucius Malfoy has his wife and has his son sitting next to him in that room. And Draco, the youngest person at that table, recognizes his well, not his, he never took the class, but recognizes the Muggle Studies teacher. It's no longer this separate kind of world for him, as we see at the end of the 6th book. He has let the Death Eaters into Hogwarts. He's been fully accepted into the Death Eaters circle, and he's 16. It shows in there as he's looking at Charity Burbage that he's shaking. He doesn't want to make eye contact. He's terrified. He's in way over his head. And that's through the fault of his parents, who should be the people you rely on to keep you safe. Or at least his father. His mom obviously doesn't want to be there either.
Yeah, it reminds me. So his reaction here reminds me. One of my favorite memes that's out right now is from one of the Planet of the Apes movies, where it's like the ape. Oh man, I forgot his name. But anyway, he's being told by the orangutan that he has to go up out of the thing, and he's like, "Oh no, oh no!" It's like this is Draco at this moment. He's like, "Wait, what did I do? This isn't a game anymore." Okay.
Yeah, he has been, I mean, he spends his entire childhood being a prick and being a blood supremacist, but he hasn't had to experience the reality of a Voldemort world. And even his parents didn't really experience that reality too much either, as Voldemort was defeated fairly early on. He was still trying to gather followers when he was defeated the first time. So now it's a much more intense thing. They've lived their lives, they have more to lose, they have families, they have kids, they have jobs. It's it's so much easier to control people who have things to lose.
Yeah, and we've seen that more and more over the past couple of books, where it's like people are doing these things because they're afraid that, Voldemort's going to, or rather, Voldemort has threatened their family, so they have to do these things. And I think I had a conversation with Chris. It's like, okay, he could do that, but he also has the Imperious Curse. He could just make you do it regardless. But I think controlling by fear gives him more of a, oh, I have control over you to make you decide to do this. I think that's more of a power play than, oh, I just can make you do whatever you want, regardless if you want to do it or not, and you don't have a choice.
Yes, and it's a total power play. It gives him that control that he so craves in a very sick way. But also, in a way, it's kind of, I don't want to say smart, but he is able to control them without people necessarily suspecting that they're being controlled. Because when you're under the Imperious Curse, you're just doing as you're told. You're not acting like yourself. It's much more suspicious. So you're just like, oh, they're acting very out of character right now, and they're doing crazy things. It's much more believable that they were under the Imperious Curse rather than they were being controlled through fear. It kind of helps him fly under the radar a little bit more as well.
Yeah. One other thing I want to point out in here. Okay, well, two things rather. Some of the names that J.K. Rowling comes up with, I'm like, how did you like pious thickness? Like, I read that, I was like, that's really a name. And then the go ahead.
Pious is a name. So from what I know about J.K. Rowling, she pulls a lot of her names from ancient Roman and ancient Greek uh civilizations, and because she has a classics degree, so all of her spells are in Latin. She pulls a lot from the Greek and Roman, so they do kind of, some of them can sound out of place, especially in a more modern society and in the middle of late 90s England as well.
Yeah. That's it?
Yeah.
Oh. And then the other thing is, I'm not sure. So I'm not sure this has been set up. I know in book one, when Harry was getting his wand, Ollivander would talk about what the wand's made out of, right? And I think I had a discussion with Mike about broomsticks and what makes a broomstick better than one broomstick better than another broomstick, because she writes about broomsticks as if they were like motorcycles. And it's like, okay, what bristles are you using? What's the wood made out of? Or what's the shape of the handle? We're talking about a person riding on this small broomstick. If you want aerodynamics, you need to change the person, you like almost like a jockey on a horse, right? And so it's like a weird conversation there. But here, whenever Malfoy gives Voldemort his wand, Voldemort, he says, "So what is it?" And he says, "Elm." And he goes, "And the core, dragon heart string." And Voldemort's like, "Good." So this insinuates that the makeup the wand makes a difference.
It
And
does. It does make a difference.
I don't think it's been talked about, like why, except for the only case is the sister wands in the Priory in Cantata. Like that's the only instance that I can think of where it did make a difference, and that was because of they were made the feather from the phoenix was in both of them.
Yes, and so it's wand composition is important, and it's not, I will say it's not super touched on in any of the books. There are some supplemental sources you can go to, like on the official websites, that do give you a little bit more information about wands. Um, but like the wood tends to be important. And it also goes back to sort of like plant theory, flower theory, and that different woods have different meanings, they have different strengths. So like if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever done woodworking, but some woods are harder than others. They're more unyielding. They tend to like handle stress more than other woods. So that's sort of where that comes in that it's, oh, elm is a sturdy wood. It probably can handle some pretty intense spells.
Okay,
And then you
that makes
have,
sense.
yeah, then you have um the three cores of bonds, which are the dragon heartstring, unicorn hair, and a phoenix feather. Those are also, I'm not exactly sure what each one of them represents, but like Harry and Voldemort's wand share a phoenix feather core.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly each one has some different magical properties. And because the wand chooses the wizard, insinuates that the wand knows what type of magic this person will be best at, and that wand does influence that type of magic. Like, not everybody is great at every spell. We see
Right.
in especially book 2, Lockhart's not great at a lot of magic, but he is very gifted in memory charms. So people are drawn to certain things, and their wand helps them with certain magic, and it hinders them with other magic. So a very light, like a very, like, what's a pretty, I don't know wood off the top of my head, but a much lighter wood, and probably like a unicorn, like a very pure core, because unicorns are supposed to be some of the most pure animals in existence. They're not going to be predisposed to dark magic. Their wands aren't going to be able to handle that very well. They themselves as a person won't be able to handle that. So that's sort of where wands come in and how they play into your personality. Because it does not control, but gives you boosts to other types of magic.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Anything else in chapter 1 before we move on to chapter 2? We're at like 40 minutes and we've
Yeah, I think we've got chapter 2 ready.
Okay. So chapter 2 in Memoriam. Wow, okay. That's a word. Words are hard. So back at Privet Drive, we got Harry digging through his trunk. This scene really just serves to remind the reader of all the trials and tribulations and all the past years that we had going on with the series, and that it also serves for us to see Harry kind of have that nostalgia and that human his humanity is showing through. Is like, oh, I remember when I did this, I remember when I did that, and knowing that in book 7, which should be year 7, he's not going back to Hogwarts, and so it's a different. He's going into a different world, so to speak.
It is, in a lot of books, one of the most stark coming of age moments that you see. He's literally putting his more happy childhood behind him. He is unpacking his trunk fully for the first time in 6 years. He is finding broken bits and things from different terms, and also goes to show that he never truly unpacked that bag because he never felt comfortable at Privet Drive. It was where he lived, and it was technically his home, but he never felt comfortable enough to fully unpack there.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, if book 6 ended with Harry and them thinking they were going to go back to Hogwarts for year 7, and then book 7 occurs, or book 7 starts, and then at that moment they don't go to Hogwarts and they never do go to Hogwarts, do you think that would have hit you different? Because I know there's some times where I'm reading a series and I get to the end of one book and I'm like, I'm looking forward to this happening, this happening, this happening, and then the next, like at the beginning of the next book, it's like, oh hey, this is what's happening. And I'm not talking about a series like A Song of Ice and Fire where one whole book is missing some of your characters. I'm talking about your characters are in that book, but they decide to take a left instead of a right when you were expecting them to take a right. Do you think that would have hit different with book 7?
I think it would have hit different, but I think it just would have also added a level of confusion, because in a way, you see throughout the books, you see Hogwarts synonymous with Dumbledore.
Mm-hmm.
Dumbledore's no longer there. So if they would have been like, oh yes, we're coming back next year, that would have been like, what have you not learned for these past 6 years, and that you are now in grave danger? Like, Dumbledore has been your protection. Once Dumbledore leaves in book 2, the attacks increase, more people get hurt. So they've been setting up for 6 books that Hogwarts isn't safe without Dumbledore, at least for Harry. So if they had realized, okay, Dumbledore's dead, we're coming back next year, I would have been confused. I've been like, what are you doing? Like,
I can see
what
that.
do you mean? You're no. And it strikes home that even Hermione's like, no, we cannot go back. Like, we have to, Hogwarts won't be safe. Because of anyone you would expect to seek the comfort of academia, it is Hermione.
Right. I agree.
So it's and it flows with the tone of the story at the end of the 6th book. Everything's dark, Dumbledore's dead, they've been given this impossible task with no directions on where to go except for the locket that they found in the cave. And you don't, it almost would be wrong to have that little note of hope at the end of maybe we'll come back, maybe we'll get a little more time. Because we're at the point of no hope at this point in the series.
Yeah.
There's no one sure what's happening. It's a dark mess right now.
Absolutely. And so once he goes through his trunk, he packs up his most important items that he wants. Most of them are his magic items he's collected over the years. Um, and this is in preparation for when he turns 17 and the charm on the house disappears. The charm from his mother and his aunt and uncle agreeing that he has a place to stay. Like that is the bond is, as long as Harry believes that that's his home, and as long as his aunt and uncle welcome him to live there, the charm that his mom has is in place for protection. And then so as he's going, he's got the daily issues of the Daily Prophet strewn about all over the room, and he picks up some of them every now and then and reads through, which provides him the news that he's getting. Like there's a common theme with the beginning of the books where he's just getting the news secondhand, and not even mostly not even from his friends. It's usually an unreliable source like a newspaper.
Yeah.
And so in this Daily Prophet, he finds out, or the prophet reports that Burbage retired. Of course, we, the reader, know that she did not retire.
Yeah. And
So you
that
kind
gives
of,
us that information that because the prophet is controlled by the ministry, that gives us that information that the ministry truly is infiltrated, that they were able to hush that up. They were able
right.
to change that narrative.
Yeah. And Chris and I were talking about, you know, sometimes it may be appropriate for a government to, not fully disclose certain things for a sense of limiting panic. Like if you panic your population, you're gonna have a hard time um, finding a solution for whatever issue is causing the panic. I mean, the government themselves are like they're panicking. And they're like, we need to find a solution to keep our populace safe. But if we disclose all of the information and now the populace is like, oh God, we're not safe, that causes a distrust in the government as well. And so the populace starts to try to find solutions. Now, if you have more minds trying to find a solution, you might come quick to finding a solution, but not everybody's going to be trusting one another. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a balance there where it's like, okay, yeah, you shouldn't lie to your you shouldn't lie to your people, but the government's going to lie to you regardless.
Yeah. Well,
So,
there's certain lies that are meant to quell panic, keep people safe, and then there are certain lies to cover things up, to not have the blame
yes.
point of the government. Whereas you have Charity Burbage, who is a Muggle studies teacher, a not terribly popular class. From what it sounds like, they picked her because she was the Muggle studies teacher, but also probably didn't have a ton of people looking for her. So why report on it? Why even report on it? Why put out the narrative, oh, she retired and moved away? No one was probably looking for her. So it does just sort of
It is
show that the
strange.
ministry is infiltrated and that certain people are trying to put what they want out.
Yeah, it is still strange because, like you said, nobody was probably looking for her.
Not at that point, because it seems to
Yeah.
happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, and like if it so for the if the Death Eaters, excuse me, if the Death Eaters have infiltrated and they wanted to report on that, like if it was if the idea of reporting on it came from the Death Eaters, I feel like they would want to be like, yeah, the Death Eaters, Voldemort's people kidnapped Charity Burbage to strike more fear. But here it's a weird thing to be like, oh, she retired. Like,
Yeah,
but then again, most people would just go, the fact that she was missing. So I guess the thing is the fact that she was missing, eventually people would start to question. So it's just like, hey, let's just address her missing and just say she retired so people don't start to look into it.
yeah. I feel like it could have just been a way almost for the author to say, to call back to that first chapter almost, to be like, hey, these things that are happening in Voldemort Circle are affecting the real world. It's being reported on the real world in a strange way.
I can see that.
But because remember, we have to remember this is 1997, 1998. There's not really cell phones. Wizards aren't using Muggle technology, so they're not even using basic landline phones. They're still communicating by owl. It's not unusual in that time to not be heard from for several weeks.
Right.
Like it's not today where if you don't hear from somebody, if no one hears from somebody in 36 hours, they're missing, they're dead. All hell's breaking loose. It's back then it was more, oh, she's probably fine.
Yeah.
Like,
There's some people that still do that today.
yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay to not respond immediately.
Yes. But it didn't quell the immediate panic like it did back then. Like late 90s, if no one knew where you were, then hey, you were probably just on vacation. Like,
Right.
so it does seem weird to me that that is something that they emphasize reporting on, that oh, she's retired, as
Yeah.
opposed to saying nothing.
Yeah.
It is an interesting thing, and I feel like it could mean several different things. But then we see the huge long obituary of Albus's from Elphias Dodge,
Alphias. Yes.
which it's a very extensive obituary, and it gives some insight into Dumbledore's past as a young man, which even Harry says it's hard for him to imagine Dumbledore as a young man. It's like almost as if he spawned at the age he was when Harry met him. He doesn't know
Right.
anything before that. And us as readers, we realize we don't either. We know so
Right.
much of Harry's backstory. We know Ron's backstory. We even know some of like Snape's backstory and Sirius's. We know nothing about Dumbledore except for what has happened in the books.
But we're about to find out.
Oh yes, but it's that moment, and for the readers, like, huh, we really don't know. We don't know anything except that he was
There-
a teacher at Hogwarts before then. Like, because we get that little snippet in Chamber of Secrets from the diary.
yeah,
But
here in this obituary, we find out he has a sister
mhm.
she'd never heard of before.
He has a
And
sister. He
then
has a brother.
we knew he had a brother.
We
It was
knew he had a
mentioned,
brother, but no one really talks about him.
right. It was mentioned before. So we knew that he had a brother. We didn't know he had a sister. Uh, technically didn't know he had a mother and father. Um, but that his father killed three muggles and went to Azkaban for it. Then um then so he had gone to Hogwarts, and then afterwards he went touring the world, and his mother died, and then his sister died. Um, or opposite, his sister died, and then his mother died.
No, the mother
No,
died
no,
first.
no, I had it right. Yeah,
Yeah, the mother
his
died
mother
first.
died, and then his sister died, and then he and his brother became estranged. And so
Yes.
we get all of that from an obituary, which, if you ask me, that's not the proper like, that's not the place to put that information about a person in their obituary. You know, talk about his family life, but don't be like, oh yeah, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Um, so it's more like a memorandum than an obituary, really. But they call it an
Yes. Yeah.
obituary. And then after that, he reads Skeeter's interview
Oh, Skeeter.
talking about the book that she wrote on Dumbledore's secret life, most of which Harry knows, or thinks are lies. He's like, no, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. But then also, this doesn't seem like Dumbledore. So he doesn't believe all that. And at the end of the chapter, and we can come back and briefly discuss some of those. At the end of the chapter, he cuts his finger on the mirror again. So he had cut it already while he's digging through the stuff. Um, and he cuts his mirror on his finger on the mirror that Sirius gave him, that he smashed after Sirius died. And then he thinks that he sees a flash of blue in the mirror. And like, if it didn't go if she didn't write after that it was Dumbledore's eyes, like, if she didn't write that Harry was thinking about Dumbledore's blue eyes, I would have had like a flash of blue. What's a flash of blue? Like, like,
Yeah.
is someone just like, psh, is he seeing through Sirius Black? Is like, okay. So,
Because yeah, we do have that moment in the mirror from after Sirius dies where Harry is like hoping that maybe Sirius had it on him when he died and he's able to communicate with his spirit or whatever. So he's spent now over a year looking into that mirror hoping to see something, and now he finally sees a flash of something. So
yeah.
it's a lot for that. It's and I feel like it's a bigger moment than they let on to in this chapter.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. There's something mentioned in this chapter that was did you want to mention anything about Skeeter?
I feel like that's her article is better addressed in a later chapter that we're going to discuss.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
So there was Harry's thinking. He says the only personal question he had ever asked his headmaster was also the only one he suspected that Dumbledore had not answered honestly, which was, "What do you see when you look in the mirror?" And Dumbledore said, "I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks." So I went off on a tinfoil hat thought in my head. I didn't look up anything online. I was just like, maybe Dumbledore thought himself as a servant, kind of like a house elf, and all he wanted was to be freed of it, and that freedom was in the form of his death. Like, he
I think
felt so
Dumbledore is a
compelled.
very complicated character. And
Yes.
we're seeing that. We're going to see that a lot more in this book. But this chapter truly is like Harry trying to close that chapter of his life and like, okay, he's about to turn 17, the trace is about to be lifted, he is about to leave the only home he's ever known. It's going to be he's of course feeling a lot of emotions. He cuts his finger twice on that mirror because he's kind of scatterbrained, he's not paying attention. He's just all over the place. Understandably, it's a very huge moment for him.
Yeah. So speaking of leaving his home, chapter 3 is the Dursleys departing, and most of this chapter, I feel like I don't feel like there's too much to discuss here. So Uncle Vernon has decided that he isn't going to leave, but it says he's gone back and forth several times here. He thinks at this point he thinks Harry is plotting to use magic to take the deed of the house. At which point I'm thinking it's like he doesn't need you to be gone from the house to do that.
Yep.
Harry convinces he convinces Vernon through convincing Dudley of through fear. So he like convinces Dudley through fear to leave the house, which forces Uncle Vernon to agree. And then Uncle Vernon's like, "Well, why can't we have that Kingsley fella? He seems, he's good enough to protect the minister. Why can't we have him?" And Harry's like, "Well, because he's protecting the minister." He's like, "Yeah, but I want the best. He's got to be the best because he's protecting the minister." And he's like, "Well, no, Daedalus Diggle and Hestia Jones." Um, I don't remember hearing the name Hestia Jones before, but
We assume that she's in the order,
yeah,
or at least not affiliated with Voldemort.
yeah. Dudley initially, so they're leaving, but then like as they're leaving, Dudley like starts to get real emotional. He's like, "I don't want to leave. You're my," like it's almost like he's like, "You're my cousin." The reality of it all is hitting him. It's like, if I leave now, I probably will never see you again.
Yes, and
And
in a way, it's also the end of Dudley's childhood. We see him, he's might be a year older than Harry. He's not much older. And he's also being forced to leave his childhood home due to the danger upon it. And Harry has been this constant in his life. He's always had Harry there. I mean, even when he was at school, it was like, oh, he's always coming back. They may not have been friends, they may not have gotten along, he may have been a huge bully, but that was a constant in his life. It was Harry was always there. And Harry was there, his house was there, and they were always safe there. So he has that moment when he's getting in the car of being like, why isn't Harry coming with us?
safe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
As safety is in the dark spells could not find him.
Yes.
But so he has that moment of, well, why isn't Harry coming with us? Like, if we're going to safety, why is he not coming to safety? So you do start to see his coming of age of being like, oh, I may have been a little shit when I was a kid.
Yeah. But I
Um,
think that's a product of his parents. Like, how his parents allowed him or raised him and allowed him to do the things he did.
yeah.
Because
And there's also
picking
that
on your,
fan theory that we'll address much later that comes into play there.
I'm interested in that because I don't know what you're talking about. But um kids will be little shits, right? They're gonna pick on their cousins, they're gonna pick on their siblings. Um and it's up to the parents to um step in and say, "Hey, look, y'all got to get along. You may think that you hate them because they do this or they order or they have these things, but it's you know it's that age. A lot of it's that age thing is you growing up or having to split resource, the parents having to decide where the resources go at certain times and the ebb and flow of things. And so a lot of it's just like jealousy. A lot of the sibling and uh, cousin rivalries come from jealousy. And so the Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia never really did much to quell that
Yeah.
in Dudley. So it's kind of up to them. And then Uncle Vernon, he's still he doesn't have any heart for Harry at all. Like he's not blood related to Harry. And so this goodbye, he's just I think he just said goodbye. He refused to shake Harry's hand. He refused to give any affection, any show of affection.
He didn't even address him as his name at the end. The line is literally, well, this is goodbye then, boy. Like he doesn't even use his name. He's so just like, you're no longer my responsibility. I'm taking care of my family. You are irrelevant to me.
Yeah. But for the second time, we see Aunt Petunia start to show some kind of emotional connection to Harry. And in this one, she says goodbye. No, Harry said goodbye, and then she stopped and looked back. And for a moment, Harry had the strangest feeling that she wanted to say something to him. And I kind of get the feeling that she wants to embrace him, but she doesn't want to risk losing her husband on doing so. And like
It's like
that,
it's almost as if she made her choice when Harry was a baby of that she would provide the absolute basic necessities. He would be given a place to sleep, he would be clothed, he would be sort of fed, but her affection went to her husband and her son.
yes.
So she made the decision to side with her husband long before, and she kind of has to live with that decision.
Yeah. Anything else on that one?
No.
So, Seven Potters. This is where Harry gets all sentimental about the Dursley house and shows Hedwig around for the last time. So I'm laughing because my wife does something sometimes with the cats. She used to do it with her cat Kitty all the time, where she would pick up Kitty and like show her on top of the fridge, show her on top of stuff where she doesn't normally see, and say, "Hey, look up here. You ever seen up here? You ever seen up here?" And I just imagine this is what Harry's doing with Hedwig. It's like, "Hey, and this is where this happened, and this is where this happened. You have no clue that I was here or this event, but in her being a magical owl, we don't know much about owls, but sure she can like comprehend him speaking to her."
Yeah, and you see this because you also realize poor Hedwig, every time that she's come home or come home with Harry, she's kept in the cage. So she
Yes.
hasn't seen the rest of the house. She's seen his room. I think eventually he's able to negotiate with Uncle Vernon that she should be allowed to go out and fly around for like an hour a week or something. And so he's saying goodbye to the house, but Hedwig's literally never seen it.
Yeah. Then the order shows up, and so no, 13 people show up. There's going to be 6 of them that are going to take Polyjuice Potion, and then the other 7 are going to be escorts for the Harrys. So Harry's going to provide them with hair so the Polyjuice Potion works, and each person's going to get paired up, and they're going to go split ways. So that this foreshadowing here, or I mean, not really even foreshadowing, but who said this? I think Hermione, no, Moody said, even you know who can't split himself into 7. Like he
Yeah.
did.
He's alluding to the chase after 7 different Harry Potters.
Yeah.
But well, I
But
mean,
he did.
he did, but only one of those physical forms can exist at one time. So his
True,
soul
true.
is split into 7 pieces, but physically he cannot. So he's right and wrong at the same time.
Right, but he doesn't know he's right.
Yes.
He has no. It's just ironic to us because Moody has no clue what Horcruxes are, or that
Oh no, I'm sure
he has
Moody,
utilized.
being in contact with so many dark wizards, know what they are. He just has no idea what Voldemort has done.
Okay, yeah. If it was book 6, so if it was book 6, I'd say he had no idea. But now with book 7, where we do learn that Dumbledore took all of the books that mention Horcruxes from the library and kept them. It's like, okay, more people did know about Horcruxes. All right.
Yeah, because when, and it's even later we touch on that a little bit more, but yeah, it's the knowledge of their existence is more common than we're led to believe, at least
Yes.
for the older wizards. But also, Moody was an Auror for so many years, and he specialized in like these very dark wizards. So I don't think there's too much he hasn't seen over his career.
True. Also, I really think Moody is a weird character because outside of book 4, we don't really spend much time with Moody,
Which is
but
sad. He's a great character.
he is, but the Moody we got to know in book 4 is not Moody.
Yeah.
So we don't get to know it's weird, but he's treated as so like apparently Barty Crouch knew so much about Moody that he impersonated his personality well and constant vigilance. It's like, like I mean, if you spent any time around Moody, you would have picked up that he would always say constant vigilance. So that's not like a hard fetch there. But he seems to have really studied his personality when he impersonated him. And
Well, Barty Crouch Jr. Well, his father worked at the ministry with him, so I mean, he was exposed to him a lot. But in a way, we also and we see Moody as one of the few people willing to tell the truth, because you see so many of the adults treating the kids with kid gloves a lot of times. Sirius says he doesn't, and he wants Harry to know all these things, but he still is very delicate with him. Moody's just like, everyone's going to try to kill you. Here's how to fix it. Like, he is very crass almost.
yeah,
And so that's why I think we
I
do
see
like
it.
him a lot as a character, because he's very different than a lot of the other adults we see in the series.
Back to kind of the low maturity level here. Um, and it mentions it. I was making a note about it, and then it actually mentioned it in here. And so Harry says after everybody takes the polyjuice potions, and then they just like strip down to put Harry's clothes on. He says he felt like asking them to show a little more respect for his privacy as they all began stripping off with impunity, clearly much more at ease with displaying his body than they would have been with their own. So if you want to know what anybody looks like without any clothes on, you just take a polyjuice potion.
You can, but as they've mentioned in previous books, they mention it uh in in Chamber of Secrets, and then again in Goblet of Fire, Snape is like, you're stealing these potion ingredients. Like, these ingredients are not all easy to come by, and the potion takes over a month to brew.
Right.
So it's not commonly, I don't think it's sold in potion shops
Probably
because
not.
of the legality issues with it. So technically, yes, you could, but it's a very difficult endeavor to do so.
Don't underestimate the lengths that creeps will go to get what they want.
Yes, but at least a lot of these potion ingredients, from what I understand, are difficult to find and to process, and you have to like brew the potion, like start like under a certain cycle of the moon. It's a process. Like,
Yeah.
it's a process to the point where we're supposed to be surprised that second year Hermione figured this out and did it correctly on the first try.
I don't think I was ever surprised. I was just like, I accept it.
Well, yeah, but when you look back and you're like, this is an incredibly difficult potion that takes over a month to brew, and Hermione was what, 12?
I think I have that disconnect sometimes when a book or movie is trying to tell me that it's something made up, like like creating potions. Like, oh yeah, this is very hard to do. Okay, and it's like this person does it. I'm like, okay,
Can't be that
okay,
hard.
they do it. um, so anyway, then so Harry sidecars with Hagrid, and everybody else pairs off. Their pairings don't matter too much.
No, one does. One pairing does matter. Moody, and we're introduced to the character of Mundungus Fletcher.
Oh yeah, Moody, and Dungus.
Yeah, which you kind of get some foreshadowing about Mundungus because he just has a skeezy sounding name.
Yes.
Like you're like,
Did
okay, we get so many like unusual names, but his just sounds skeezy.
did chapter 10 reveal him?
A little bit.
Like confirm?
Yeah,
Okay.
a little bit.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Like, I mean, I kept getting the feeling. I just couldn't remember that it just like confirmed.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So we'll talk about more about him later on. So as they leave, 30-ish, I wrote Dementors, Death Eaters
Yeah.
attack the group. I'm glad
Instantly. It's like immediately.
yeah, immediately, and then Hedwig dies.
Oh, poor Hedwig.
I don't, I don't know. I didn't feel too much. I guess I didn't put myself in now that I do because Kitty died in November. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, if you have a pet, it's more than just a pet for him.
Especially, well, so Hedwig dies supposedly taking a curse that was meant for Harry. And it's also one of those things that symbolizes sort of the death of his childhood. Hedwig has been with him through so many crazy events, and now she takes a spell that was meant for Harry. She dies. It's one of those. It's another unfortunate coming of age metaphor. The representation of his childhood, the pure white snowy owl, dies protecting him.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was dull because it was just the wasn't the cage. Didn't the cage just happen to fall out in front instead of
The cage was sitting
Hedwig?
in between his knees, like it was sitting in front of him.
Yeah, so it wasn't like Hedwig flew in between him and the
No,
curse and like sacrificed herself. She just was collateral, right?
kind of. It's that she was in front of him and was a living thing that took a killing curse instead of him.
So I guess it still plays that to Harry being around him, you're collateral.
Yeah.
And that's what he's trying, that's why he's treating Ginny the way he's treating Ginny and
Yeah.
like pushing her away, which I
And
always
in
thought
times,
was just
Ron and
very
Hermione, he tries to do that to them too at times.
right. But if you're that close, he knows he's close to the Weasleys. Like
Yeah.
Voldemort knows that Harry's close to the Weasleys. He's gonna go after him regardless if he's dating one of them or not. And whether or not he's dating him, Harry still has those feelings for Ginny. So it's just like weird. Like I wanna if I was Harry, I feel like I would want to soak up as much of a relationship as I could. I'm for me, so my grandfather that's still alive, he's got dementia, Alzheimer's. He doesn't know who I am. When I go visit him, and it's been that way for the last few years, I go visit him, he has no clue who I am. But he's not the same when I go visit him as when I was a kid. It's a shell of who he was, but I want to go be with him, get a picture with him every time I go. Just, it's like, hey, I want to remember him after he goes. Um, as opposed to sorry, my I got so like off on this train, I forgot where I was tying it back in. Um it's weird. I would want to soak it up. Like if the girl I loved was there and I was going off on seemingly what could be a suicide mission, I would want to soak up the relationship as much as I could. Because the feelings are there between the two of them. And if he dies and they didn't have the relationship, she'd still be sad. If she dies, he'd still be sad. Just
He's a
go do
kid.
the
He
thing.
does stupid things.
Yeah.
Like we're showing so much of him, like of these coming of age things, but he at this point he is just about to turn 17. You're still stupid. Like you still make a ton of mistakes when you're 17,
Oh
16,
yeah.
17 years old. Like in a way, like we have all these things like in the wizarding world, he's an adult. He's older, he's an adult now. He's a kid. He's a kid. He's a scared kid. He's not gonna always make the right decision.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So as he's riding away, story focuses most on the real Harry, and Stan Shunpike is chasing them.
Who we haven't seen since book 3.
We heard about him in book 6 and book 5.
Yeah, but we haven't seen him. We haven't had an
Yeah,
interaction with him since
we
book
haven't had
3.
interactions, and Harry previously was under the impression that Stan Shunpike was under an Imperious curse. Um, may or may not be so, but Stan Shunpike recognizes Harry as the real Harry Potter. I don't if if it was clear in the thing, it was too subtle for me to pick up on. He just disappears and returns with Voldemort.
So we're operating under the assumption that Voldemort has taught the Death Eaters certain beneficial spells and abilities. Um, like it's kind of wizarding lore that you're not supposed to be able to fly without a broom or some sort of magical creature that can fly. So obviously, certain like Voldemort, as we see later in this chapter, is able to fly without a broom.
Right.
And that's like a huge revelation to them. So we see Voldemort as this ultimate big bad in the series. He is very powerful. He is a very strong wizard. And it would make sense that he would be willing to experiment with any kind of dark magic possible to give him whatever ability he wants. Whereas the Order would have some moral issues with that. Voldemort's
Right.
like, oh, I have to sacrifice this heart of a 7-year-old to get this ability? Sure. He wouldn't care. But the good guys have their morals and their ethics.
Yeah. So you're surmising that Stan used some type of dark magic spell, dark art spell to know that it was the real Harry?
No, they explain later why they think he immediately knew it was Harry.
Oh, okay.
They do
So,
explain actually it's either this chapter or the next chapter that I think it's Lupin who tells him like they knew it was you because you're like Expelliarmus is your calling card.
oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I,
Like
I remember that now.
you never aim to hurt, you always aim to disarm. And so because everyone else around you was aiming to hurt, he knew it was you.
Okay, yeah. I,
But
I
I
remember that
do,
now.
and then I do believe because they say that we're showing that like the dark mark does have some sort of communication properties and that they're able to use the dark mark to summon Voldemort throughout different parts of the series. So that's probably what he did. He realized, oh, this has to be the real Harry. Use the dark mark to summon Voldemort. But as we see later, Voldemort's already there. He's going after various Harrys until someone tells him which one's the real one.
Right.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Hagrid is essentially playing Mario Kart with
Yep. Oh yeah.
his thing. It was kind of fun when I realized that. I was like, he's just like blink, blink, blink.
Yeah, he's just throwing
Uh,
things at the back of the motorcycle, essentially just throwing blue shells at people and hoping they
and
hit.
and then something very I had to go back and reread it after the next chapter when he said, "Yeah, my wand just did it on its own." I was like, "What?" So I went back and reread it. But yeah, Harry's because it's she just mentions it in one sentence and moves on. Like doesn't give Harry a reaction to it happening really in this chapter. There's that he felt it drag his hand around with some great sorry, as the pain from Harry's scar forced his eyes shut, his wand acted of its own accord. He felt it drag his hand around like some great magnet, saw a spurt of golden fire through his half-closed eyelids, and heard a crack and a scream of fury. So, like, at this point, Harry's wand is acting on its own
We
against.
think that it's acting on its own. Much later in the book, I have a theory about that, but we'll go into that much later in the book. I think I do have a theory as to what happened there. But as of right now, we're to assume that somehow his wand knew to protect him. While wands choose the wizard, they're not typically sentient things.
Right.
Um,
And Voldemort brings that up later. He's like, forgot who he was talking to, but
probably Ollivander.
Oh yeah, yes. When he was talking to Ollivander, he's like, "You told me that if it was a different wand, so like something has happened." Like
Yeah.
Voldemort's thoughts was if he didn't have the same, if he didn't have the sister wand, Priori and Cantata or whatever happening wasn't going to happen. So
Yeah, and I feel like we almost, especially in the seventh movie, you get a tiny bit more explanation than in the book. When he's asking for Lucius's wand, you get our wands share a core. We can wound but not mortally injure each other. So you get that one little line of clarification in the movie that we don't really get in the book. Of that they can hurt each other, but because they share that one core, they can't kill each other with those wands.
And at the end, Hagrid falls out of the motor car, and Harry safely lands it outside of
Safely. He crash lands it.
safely. He is safe. Harry is safe. That was they went to what Auntie Muriel's house. Is it?
No, they went to
Or
Andromeda's house.
oh yeah,
Andromeda and Ted Tonks.
gotcha. Yep.
And
Details.
This is the first time I believe that we meet Andromeda. We've heard of her throughout the books because she is Tonks's mom. And we know that she's Bellatrix and Narcissa's sister.
And
And
Harry
has that
immediately
reaction.
thought, yeah, because she looks more like Bellatrix than Narcissa.
Yeah.
And so Harry was like, what are you doing here? Like, oh my God.
And then he pauses, he gets a better look, he realizes it's not her. And then we meet Ted Tonks, who is a Muggleborn, and that is why Andromeda was kicked out of her family. She marries a Muggleborn. Actually, I think he was also a Hufflepuff, so just double whammies for the Slytherins here.
A failure of a person, right?
I can't say that. My husband's a Hufflepuff. But for the Slytherins,
he's a failure of
a
a
Muggleborn
person.
and he's a Hufflepuff? Absolutely not.
Anything else you want to talk about in chapter 4?
Let's see. So chapter 4, we get everyone starting to arrive at the burrow. And chapter 4 is where we learn oh no.
No,
that's
the
right.
next chapter is when they go.
Chapter 5.
Yeah. So like at the end of chapter 4, Harry thinks like
Hagrid's dead.
Hagrid's dead. And then it moves on to chapter 5 where we have a time jump. Or no, well,
it's a small time jump. He passes out.
Yeah, he didn't immediately pass out at the end of chapter 4, but at the beginning of chapter 5, he's searching for Hagrid. He passes out, then he wakes up and he's all better and is told that Hagrid is fine.
Yeah, he's on the mend. He's getting fixed up.
Yeah, so we actually did move into chapter 5 already. So
with
the
Andromeda and
Fallen Warrior.
Ted Tonks, yeah.
Yeah. TED Talks. Welcome to my TED Talk. TED Talk. Um, yeah, so Harry collapses near Hagrid, wakes up inside, fixed up, and mistakes Tonk's mom, Andromeda, for Bellatrix because she looks a lot like her. Then they take the port key to the burrow. And
find
every,
they're the first ones back, and they should
yeah,
not have been.
yeah, everybody's late. It's like, what happened? So just first, Lupin and George show up. George is missing an ear. This is where we found out that the Expelliarmus gave Harry away.
Mhm.
Then Shacklebolt and Hermione show up. Then Mr. Weasley and Fred. Uh, George, like the twins do, he jokes about being holy.
Mhm.
Then a long wait happens before Tonks and Ron arrive. Um, we find out that Bellatrix wants to kill Tonks. Bill and Fleur show up. We find out, or we presumably find out, or we find out that presumably, or assumedly, Moody got killed. Then suspicions arise. Uh, the then fall. So people start to
But no,
suspect.
Bill just flat out exclaims Moody's dead.
Right.
Yeah.
No, no, I'm just saying that like so Moody, yeah, he says Moody's killed, and then they start to suspect that Mundungus is a Death Eater, but then they somehow the suspicions fall. They're like, oh no, he's just he's Mundungus.
He's a coward and he's a little skeezy, but they're sitting there like, well, Mundungus was the one who came up with the plan of the Seven Potters, is what is said. So
Yes.
why would he not have told him that if he was the leak? They just knew the date. They didn't know about the multiple Potters plan. So yeah, but no, it is showing that's why, like I said, Mundungus and Moody is an important pairing, because Mundungus was coerced into being one of the Seven Potters after he came up with the idea, and Moody paired himself with him because he realized he was probably the weakest link, and he got killed for it because Mundungus left at the first sign of real trouble.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I got too silent for too long and it made it weird. So next up, Harry gets mad at Lupin. Lupin thinks he's foolish like his dad. Then Lupin and Bill leave to recover Moody's body. So they go off. After that, Harry insists he has to leave for everybody's safety, but is talked down. And at the end, he has this vision or dream of Voldemort torturing Ollivander.
And that's how that calls back to the first chapter. We now know who the guest that Pettigrew was supposed to keep quiet was. We knew who he had locked up. It was Ollivander.
Yes. At the very beginning, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, someone's screaming from the dungeon, and Voldemort's like, Pettigrew, you're supposed to keep our guest quiet.
For some reason, I thought that was Burbage.
No, Burbage can't. She can't really. At that point, no, at that point when they say that, she's been killed.
I thought that
Like,
was
she's not
before.
screaming or anything. She's like hovering above the table. They would have known it was her screaming. We find out that the person that he has captive is Ollivander.
Okay, I missed that. What do you want to talk about in this chapter?
So we also now see that there is a distrust within the order of each other. They're questioning, they're ensuring that each other is who they say they are, that they're not under the Imperious Curse, because they wouldn't necessarily be able to recall specific details if they were under the Imperious Curse. They're only going with what that person is guiding them with. So we see it in Lupin. He immediately grabs Harry and asks him, what was the creature that sat in the corner of my office when Harry Potter first came to talk to me? And they're like, Lupin also asks it of Kingsley when Kingsley arrives in with Hermione. Like they're showing this sort of not distrust of each other, but distrust of how they can be manipulated. So we're seeing that. And especially now that they all think, because the plan was leaked, they think they've been betrayed. So now they're really wondering, well, who knew, who did it? Which we still don't find out at this point who leaked the information about when Harry was going to be moved. But they're trying to figure it out. This is also where we see that Voldemort was there pretty much the entire time. He went after Mundungus, then he goes after Fleur, and until Stan Chung Pike draws him in the direction of the real Harry. But I do also, I find one part of it kind of funny. Hagrid's like, why aren't you asking me anything? Like, why aren't you accusing me of not being who I am? And they have to go, dude, you're half giant. The Polyjuice Potion wouldn't work on you. Like it would. So they have to be like, come on, guy.
But then again, later on, they keep suggesting that Hagrid is like untrustworthy, and not in
He's
in
they don't
regards to
they don't think he's
this.
willingly untrustworthy. They think that he may have just gotten drunk and let something slip.
Right. Yeah, they don't want to keep him. A lot of them don't want to keep him in the loop of things, just because he does tend to have loose lips when he is drinking.
Yeah.
He's almost always drinking. So
yeah, not a great
which the
person to have
drinking
on
in
school
this
grounds, but
the amount of drinking has increased drastically in this series with the last
they
two
are
books.
older. They are showing more vices of how people cope with things, and things are getting darker. So it makes sense.
Mead, pumpkin juice, and butter beers. Butter beers aren't supposed to be.
Fire whiskey, lots of fire whiskey.
Yeah, lots of fire whiskey.
Yeah, so they have the whole discussion of why the leak couldn't have been Mundungus, but then they're trying to heal George, and it's all very chaotic, actually, when you read through it. There's so much going on until Bill walks in and says Moody's dead. Then everybody gets quiet. That's the oh shit
Yeah.
moment. We see Hedwig die, which is sad, but it's not detrimental.
Yeah, it's not a shit's got real.
Yeah.
Like whenever you have somebody who's one of the supposed to be one of the best Aurors that was there get killed, then you're like, oh, now it's serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he is our first. Well, we have Charity Burbage and then Moody on the kill count so far
In this book.
But and then George has the narrow escape. And I do believe, like, oh, that's right. So Bill comes in and says Moody's dead. Fred is outside or something. He doesn't hear it, or they arrive after Bill. So he walks in to the very somber thing and finds out, oh shit. So that's happening. They start drinking. Everyone's kind of coming back, and they're no longer the Harry. The Polyjuice Potion's wearing off. George is still making ear jokes. I think at this point we also find out a little bit more of how extensive the order is, because we sort of believe it to be the people that were always at Grimmauld Place. But now they say there's 12 possible safe houses you could be at. Like you start to see how much more extensive the network really is, because all these people went to a different safe house first before arriving at the borough.
Right.
So now we're wondering, okay, well, who was willing to put their house up as a safe house knowing that it could put them as a target? Like, who are all these people? We're being introduced to a lot of people so far in the book that actually we didn't really hear from or didn't know about too much, and realizing how much bigger the order is than we thought.
And it seems a perfect place for it right now, just because it's like shit's getting real. Harry's not going back to school. Okay, so now we're going to focus on the real world, and this is the last book, so it's got to be, who do we have? So you got to show the readers, like, as the readers, you got to know, okay, who are our players? Because otherwise, if it was just these people that are at the borough at the moment, it's like, this is pretty grim.
Yeah.
Extremely grim. So
Yeah, so we do see it being much more extensive. And I feel like even it's not always portrayed as being very extensive. It's not. A lot of times you think of the order as just this kind of almost small resistance, when in reality it's much bigger than a lot of people see.
yeah, the ghoul in pajamas. All right, so look, the ghoul. What's the purpose of the ghoul?
Like for right now, or just in general?
No, why have a ghoul in the attic?
The ghoul just lives there. That's just, they can't get rid of him. It's his house. He lives in the attic. He doesn't seem to be aggressive. It's just an accepted part.
They make it seem like the family wanted a ghoul and they keep it in the attic.
No, I think it's just one of those things that they kind of just are there, sort of like, um
The
oh god,
ghosts
what
at
am I blanking?
Hogwarts.
No, why am I forgetting the name of the creature? A boggart.
Yeah.
Sort of like a boggart. They're just kind of there. It doesn't, like, they're able to communicate somewhat with it. It doesn't appear to be aggressive. Meh.
Just always makes noise up in the attic.
Yeah, he's just always up in the attic. If there's any family that wouldn't kick out a ghoul, it's the Weasleys. Uh, they're just like, he can have the attic. It's fine.
And there's like 6 floors to the burrow.
There's like a crazy amount of floors. When they describe it, I think in the second one, it's just like almost like houses on houses on houses, just stacked up as they've needed more room. They've just added another layer.
Yeah.
That has just all
So
been held
weird.
together by magic. It should not make any logical sense, but
It's kind of almost like Hal's moving castle, except it doesn't move.
sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So Mrs. Weasley pressures Harry to tell him his secret mission, and like it's so weird that, like, the way I think the way she's like pressuring him is kind of sleazy. Like well, you understand that there's a need for some secrets, but at the same time she wants to know because he's young, and she kind of treats him as her son and
Yeah,
wants to
it's
protect him.
she's a mom. She's a mom.
Yeah.
She wants that information by any means necessary. Because not only is Ron her biological son, she views Harry as a son. She views Hermione as a daughter. She knows they're gonna go do something dangerous, and she has been the one the entire time advocating he's too young to know all of this. He shouldn't be involved in all of this. She's just been this overbearing mother figure. So it doesn't surprise me that she's wanting to try to guilt the information out of him.
No.
It's not surprising.
So I was going to point out, they talk about it in this chapter. I mentioned in the last chapter that Moody is presumed dead. And the reason here is because they didn't hold a funeral for him because they never recovered his body. So we don't have a confirmation that Moody is dead. So
we don't have true confirmation. They have not found his body, but I'm not sure if it's this chapter, if it's the next one. They are able to kind of talk about there's no way he's alive. Like there's no way.
no.
But some people are still kind of holding out hope that maybe he's alive somewhere.
So next up, we have some of the order come for dinner, and they start to discuss how the ministry is lying to the public about how powerful Voldemort is now and about things he has done. We discussed. I made a note here to actually discuss how governments will keep things from public. We discussed all that already. Hermione and Ron tell Harry about their preparations for leaving with him. The ghoul is going to become Ron, and then Hermione has cast memory charms on her parents and told them to move to Australia, which they have already moved to Australia.
Yeah.
And it's the best case scenario for them because like she's made it so that they don't remember that they have a daughter. And so like if she doesn't make it back, then she won't be able to remove the charm and they'll just live a happy life together as Mr. and Mrs. Wilkinson or whatever it is. Wilkins out in Australia. So
yeah, and they're targets in different ways, all three of them. Harry obviously is like enemy number one for Voldemort. He is the biggest target, but Hermione's parents are muggles. He would have no problem killing them with or without any information that they could give up. So she has to get them as far away as possible to protect them. Whereas Ron's family does have some protection in that they are pure blood. They may be seen as blood traitors, but they are pure blood. So the other wizards, they're not reluctant to kill them. If it came down to it and they had to, they'd kill them. But they're also like, we're supposed to be doing this to protect pure blood. So it doesn't look great if we go immediately kill them.
right.
So that's why they come up with this ghoul in the attic plan. Even though we find out Mrs. Weasley is still refusing to believe that they're not going back to Hogwarts. Arthur is much more realistic in realizing they can't go back.
Yeah, he's in on the plan.
Yeah. But so it makes sense for Hermione to not show up. It makes sense for Hermione not to show up because so many Muggleborns are fleeing. They wouldn't question that. In fact, they'd be like, hey, another Muggleborn's gone. Great. Except for that she's Hermione Granger and that they want her dead too. Harry obviously is not going to go back. They're not going to question that either. But unlike Harry and Hermione, Ron has people to lose. And he has family members that are in jobs at the ministry that has been infiltrated. So he can't just appear to run off with Harry and Hermione and in order to keep his family safe. So the ghoul does become a very good literary device at this point in being sort of a scapegoat for Ron. In fact, they talk about how the ghoul knows the plan to some extent, and he seems to be really excited to move into Ron's room from the attic.
so silly. Yeah. So before they did all that, when Mrs. Weasley was trying to get all the plans, the secret mission out of Harry, uh, she was giving tasks around the house to Harry, Ron, and Hermione that kept them apart from
Mhm.
each other, so they couldn't communicate with each other. So,
Yes.
uh, not the first, not the last time that we'll see somebody trying to separate the three of them. Um, it's not the first time, and it won't be the last time.
No. As I said, they are strongest together, and they their enemies realize that, so they do try to separate them a lot. Um, but yeah, Mrs. Weasley's like, she has the thought of, if they can't spend time together, they can't plot their escape. So,
Yeah,
and she doesn't want them to escape, whether or not it's for their safety or not. She sees a mom. She's like, no, they're here. I can see them. I can protect them, even if she really can't. That's that mom tendency.
yeah. So some of the other things, the very end of the chapter, we get the Delacroix show up because they decided that they were going to go through with the wedding. I think at the end of chapter 5, they decided they were still going to have the wedding because they needed a little bit of reprieve in this hellhole that they found themselves in. But prior to all of that, Hermione is like, she's going through all of her books and deciding which ones she's going to bring, which ones are going to be the most helpful, and which ones to leave behind. So she basically wants to bring a mobile library. Good thing she enchanted her bag to be
Mhm.
a bag of holding, and so with the what expansion spell is that
An
what it's called?
undetectable extension charm.
There you go.
So it's she can hold anything in there, and no one will be able to tell that that bag's enchanted.
Correct. And that's the extensions charm. Is that the same that they used on like the tents at the
I imagine it's a very similar charm as the one they use on the tents. Probably also similar magic to what is woven into the room of requirement.
and as Chris has pointed out, the invisibility cloak as well. Chris has this theory that the invisibility cloak is just whatever size and weight that you need it to be.
I don't think so, because I remember,
He
I feel
stored
like
it
in
in
the
his
early
pocket.
books they have to, like, when it's all three of them under it, they have to like really crouch down to not be seen.
Yeah,
I
but
think it's fine for one person, but for multiple people, I don't think it just expands over people.
they all three of them were under it in book 6 though.
That's true.
And
I
they're
don't know.
much bigger.
I don't think it's a cloak of infinite expansion. I think it has its limits.
But it
Uh,
can also fit in Harry's pocket.
yes, I mean, well, it's supposed to be like this very thin, like material. It's not supposed to be like a heavy winter cloak. Like it's not. It's meant to turn you invisible. It's not meant to keep you warm.
Yeah, but what's that rule about how many times can you fold a piece of paper in half? What's the limit?
Is it
7?
7 or something?
Yeah, I think it's like 7. Like you're not going to get the cloak small enough to fit in your pocket if three grown human beings can, no matter how thin it is.
Yeah. I mean, but also they do have charms to make things smaller. They do have charms to make things bigger. So it may have been partially the cloak's magic allowed it to be made bigger. It I don't think it itself will do that. It seems to
I,
be a pretty finite piece of magic.
I love that the topic most discussed on these 7 books, all the episodes on these 7 books is the physics of the size and of objects in the space that they contain.
Well, because it's so debatable because there's no real rules on it.
There is not. But also, Chris and I believe that every wizard, they should have an extension charm on their pockets in all of their clothes.
Yep. And I think that's why Hermione makes that distinction, is that is an undetectable extension charm. Because I imagine, and she did say it was a tricky piece of magic, so it might just be that your average wizard just can't maintain that spell. Because while you're doing a spell, and we see that a little bit later, you have to be maintaining it while it's in action. Like, you can't just forget that you have it on. Like, some part of you has to be like mentally aware of it.
Okay. So how does in that case, and now I'm going off on a tangent, Lockhart's the spell that Lockhart got hit with in book 2?
Oh, the one he hit himself with?
Yes. How is that still in place? Or I mean, does that just like permanently affect him?
I think it just permanently affect in the same way that you see these memory charms, and just like any other mental health issue, they're tricky. It appears that they like erase what was there. So even if the charm were to break, they wouldn't remember.
Okay.
So
Yes.
it's tricky magic, and also we don't know the exact rules for everything. They're not fully
It's
fleshed
as
out in
as
these
Justin
books.
says, it's a soft magic system.
Yeah.
No hard defined rules. So we also find out that I mentioned before, Dumbledore removed all of the books that had any info on
On Horcruxes.
Horcruxes, but he didn't destroy them. The one that Hermione found it says that one of them that she found has explicit instructions on how to make a Horcrux. And it was called Secrets of the Darkest Art. And she says it's a horrible, really awful book and full of evil magic. Like, okay.
Yeah,
I
but
can see why Dumbledore would just want to keep that in protection.
yes, but I mean, we see it in book 6 as well, is that he has Harry use his like closeness with Slughorn to get confirmation on what Voldemort's done. Dumbledore already thought that that's what Voldemort did. And we even see it in this chapter where Harry points out that Voldemort asked Slughorn what would happen if he made 7 of them, not how to make a Horcrux. He knew how to make a Horcrux. He obviously found one of these books, and Dumbledore realized that he found these books, and so he pulled them, or he knew through some other means. But that's what I'm saying is, that's why I think Mad Eye knew that these existed. He just didn't know Voldemort did them, because they were in books. People had access to, in some quantities, to this knowledge that Horcruxes existed and how to make them. For most people, it was just too terrible a thing to do to ever do that. Voldemort had no such qualms.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure so Hermione wants to also take Hogwarts of History, and I think that book has been mentioned in every book.
Yeah, and it's important in this one because we keep in the obituary in Hogwarts of History, we keep seeing that name pop up of Bathilda Bagshot.
Yes.
And it's an important name for this, which we will find out more. And we find out a little bit more in the next couple chapters, but we also find out more later in the book.
Yeah. And then the last thing in this chapter that I was going to mention was they talk about Horcruxes and like how they can affect a person, like how they can possess a person. And so they use the diary as a and they also talk about how the diary was destroyed.
Yeah.
So Jenny was possessed by the diary because she got close to it emotionally. Like, she wrote her emotions, like it says she poured her heart out into the diary. And at which point that made a connection with her and was able to possess her and tell her to do things. And
which we don't see with Harry because he only uses the diary once.
right.
That connection's not able to be formed. It has to be a strong connection.
And of course, they talk about how the diary was destroyed, which was because of the venom of the
basilisk fang.
the basilisk venom, and it wasn't necessarily the basilisk venom, but the venom was something that just did so much damage over time, basically, that the Horcrux wasn't able to, heal itself back up.
Yeah, because the basilisk venom is you can kill a person and not kill their magic. But basilisk venom is one of the things that can kind of dissolve magic. And there is only one antidote, and that's the Phoenix Tears. Which obviously Fox was like, I ain't saving that. We're getting these people out of the Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah, why would you want to do that? Chapter 7, The Will of Albus Dumbledore. So this is the other part where oh no, sorry. Is it this? Oh yeah, it is the part. So Scrimgeour comes. So before that, Harry dreams of Grigorovich. He has no idea who Grigorovich is,
Yep.
but has this
In fact, he
dream.
thinks it's a Quidditch player.
Yeah. Well, no, I think Ron tells him later, it's like, do you mean Gorgovich or something?
Yeah, like he can't remember the name clearly.
It's like you remember the wrong name. This person here, this guy's a Quidditch player. You obviously were dreaming about him. It's like, no. Harry uses because Harry's 17 now, it's his birthday. He just decides to use magic for mundane things. Just like Axios. When he woke up, he what was it?
He acioed his glasses to him until
Yeah.
he hit himself in the face with them.
he threw stuff around the room at one point with magic as well.
Yeah.
Um
So
he
that is one thing that I find a little bit off with. Harry's now able to use magic without someone identifying where he is. In the battle, when he's leaving his house, he still has the trace on him. He's throwing spells left and right, trying to protect Hagrid. No one says a word about that. Like
but the trace
it's
the trace is also, they mentioned, if somebody does magic in the vicinity of somebody under the age of 17, it's triggered as well. And so
yeah, and I
if
guess that's
they
why they put him with Hagrid, because Hagrid himself doesn't really do magic, so he would be more of a black spot on that radar, but it's and I think we also see it in other random little points in the books where like Harry's at the Dursleys for summer and he like uses Lumos or something small. So I guess there's a limit to what they actually consider unreasonable use of underage magic.
right.
And so,
That's
but I
that's what I
imagine
figured
getting in a
too.
giant battle with about 30 wizards in the sky exceeds that a little bit.
Yes, but I think for that they could tell that magic is being used. They don't know who. So they knew they knew that Harry was using magic when the Dementors were attacking him and Dudley because there was nobody else in the area. It was just him and Dudley. So whenever they looked at it, oh, okay, it's obviously him. But there were other times it's stated it's in one of the books somewhere, but there was
It's
other.
brought up more in the fourth book with the house elf who uses a wand when after the Death Eaters have gone through the Triwizard, not the Triwizard tournament, the Wizarding World Cup camp. It's explained a little
Yes.
bit more there.
Yeah. So um Harry gets his birthday presents. Ron.
Ron's a guy. He's being a guy.
He gives him 12 fail-safe ways to charm witches, which explains everything you need to know about girls. Now, here's the thing. Ron already kind of gave his permission and grace to Harry to date his sister on the grounds that he doesn't snog her in public, right?
Oh yeah.
And now Ron just gave
Fairly
him,
reasonable rule.
yeah, yeah. Ron just gave him a book that says this is how you do whatever you want with my sister.
Well, no, so at this point, Harry and Jenny have already broken up.
Yes, but still.
But I think he's kind of hoping that one, it'll distract Harry a little bit, and two, it'll like keep him away from Ginny. Because at the same time, Ron likes Harry and Ginny, but at the end of the day, he's Ginny's older brother. And he's like, I gotta
Yes.
protect her too. Like, I don't want Harry just kind of like yo-yoing with her feelings. We're about to go, we probably will die. I kind of want to shift his focus a little bit. Ron is much smarter and much more emotionally aware than a lot of people give him credit for. Like he knows a lot of stuff, especially about the Wizarding World. He understands the Wizarding World in a way that Harry and Hermione can't because they weren't raised in it.
Okay. Yeah.
So he understands things a lot more, and also he's the only one with siblings, so he understands that sibling dynamic more than they do.
I can see that. His other presents, not too not too important what he gets from people, I don't think. Except for Ginny, who's like her present is they go up to her room
And make out.
and they're making out and Ron busts in on them. But Hermione is right behind Ron, and like right when Ron busts in the door, Hermione's like, Ron, no, don't do it. So
Where you see Ron playing the protective big brother and Hermione kind of playing the hopeless romantic in that situation.
good old Ron, and I know these book episodes are supposed to be more for children, but Ron cock blocked Harry. There's no other term here for that. So after that, Scrimgeour crashes the birthday dinner. So they're getting ready for dinner. Scrimgeour shows up and he wants to talk to all three of them separately. So again, this like let's separate the children and talk to them. And they're like, well, no, you'll get either all of us together or you're not going to talk to any of us. And he brings Dumbledore's will, which of course they've had for 2 weeks or something.
30 days. 30 days.
Yeah,
They've had it for
30
30 days.
days. And they're like, Hermione's like, well, why'd you? Oh, I know why you kept these because y'all wanted to, like,
Make sure there wasn't anything attached to them or all that.
yeah, which is bullshit, but whatever. The Ministry never really liked Dumbledore much, so he left Ron the Deluminator, Hermione the Tales of Beetle the Bard, and Harry the Snitch from the first game, along with Godric's sword, which Scrimgeour did not um, relinquish to
Also,
Harry.
did not want to relinquish Harry, but also did not have in his possession. Like it wasn't something like he had, and was
Correct.
just like, I'm just not giving this to you. He didn't have it.
Yeah,
It
he
was
didn't bring it with.
yeah
He doesn't have it. It's
yeah
probably still over at Hogwarts.
yeah.
So, um, why? Of course, the kids then discuss the importance of each item and why Dumbledore left each one. They're like, well, why would I? Why would he leave this? But I really want like so Scrimgeour's hypothesis here. He was trying to trap Harry into this thing where it's like, oh, the snitches remember the
They
first
have the
person.
flesh memories. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, here, take it. Like, take it, and we're gonna find out exactly what it knows, or whatever. Which nothing happened. And so like Scrimgeour was like, but I really want, why why is Scrimgeour like just so hell bent on finding out Harry's plans and his thoughts that Dumbledore sent him on a mission? Like,
He's another one of those characters who is searching for power. He thinks he should have this power as Minister for Magic. And think about it, you're like this 50, 60-year-old wizard, you're finally in the top position in the country, and you're being like undermined and completely disregarded by a group of 17-year-olds. Plus, we think, or I believe, that Scridgemore he's not influenced by Voldemort yet. He truly is like wanting the defeat of Voldemort, but he's looking at it like a politician. He's not looking at it as a greater good thing. He's looking at it as, how is this going to affect the ministry? How is this going to affect the safety of everybody? How is this going to make the government look bad if these 3 17-year-olds run off on this quest from Dumbledore? He's thinking about it like a politician. And
okay.
whereas Harry, Ron, and Hermione, they have a gray area, but they're still thinking pretty much in terms of black and white. Of this is good, this is bad. And because they don't classify the ministry as good, they have now classified the ministry as bad. So they are, even if Scridgemore is completely on their side, they want him, like he wants to help them. They're like, nope, you work for the ministry. There's not a redeeming thing about you. You're bad. And that does show their immaturity. They are, once again, they're 17.
Yeah. Any, I can't think of anything else.
Yeah. That's pretty much that chapter. But we do see, because we see throughout the books Harry building this relationship with Dumbledore, and we don't stop to think for a minute of, oh yeah, Ron and Hermione really didn't have much to do with Dumbledore, except for when it was with Harry.
Right.
And so they're like, even Ron's like, why would he leave me something? Like, I never really talked to him. Like, I don't know what's happening here. And Hermione's like, shut up.
It's the same thing with Dobby.
Yeah.
Like, Hermione and Ron never had very limited interactions with Dobby.
Yeah. So
And
many of
like,
these
I
characters
don't,
we see have very limited interactions with Ron and Hermione. And you don't really realize it until this book, the 7th book, really. You're like, oh yeah.
yeah. So then we move on to the wedding. And so here they there's a lot of exposition that happens in this chapter. So first of all, the guests arrive. Harry notices something odd about Lupin. He's acting odd.
Yes,
I didn't highlight anything.
so he shows up, and at first he's like, oh, hello, and he's being polite and everything, and then the second like he turns away, like his face falls. He gets much more somber. And I believe, and Tonks explains it, because when Scridgemore showed up, Tonks and Lupin immediately left the night before. She explains that there's just a lot of very anti-werewolf sentiment going around, and that is something Lupin struggled with his whole life, of being profiled because of being bit by a werewolf and becoming one himself. And so he's he's probably very nervous to be at this event where there's a lot of people, there's a lot of moving parts. They can't really control the total security of it. And he now feels like he has to protect his new wife and to protect Harry. And Lupin's under a lot of stress, okay?
Yeah, I see that. I did find the spot where it said it, and then right after I actually highlighted it was quickly sorry. Harry was quickly distracted by Hagrid sitting in the wrong spot and just like shattering a whole bunch of chairs into matchsticks
Yeah.
because he misunderstood where he was supposed to sit.
I don't think, and I'm trying not to bring up the movies very much, but I don't think we get in the movies just how big Hagrid is supposed to be comparatively.
Yeah, he's like 10 feet tall, right?
Yeah, he's supposed to be like he's half giant. He's supposed to be. I know he's over 8 feet. He can't fit through doorways. He's supposed to be massive. I mean, they show him as bigger than the other students, obviously, but he's supposed to be much more massive in the books.
Yeah, it said something like, I mean, I remember when Grop was introduced, and Grop was a runt, and he still towered over. I think it said he was half as high as
As
um
Guap, yeah.
or no, Grop was half more higher, taller than Hagrid.
Yeah, yeah.
So, which Hagrid puts Hagrid between 9 and 10 feet, and they said Grop was about 16 feet.
Yeah.
So puts Hagrid between 9 and 10 feet tall. So just a big guy. So we start to meet more of the Weasleys. We get Funklebilius that shows up, and that's obviously where Fred and George kind of get their kookiness from.
Oh no, so they miss him. He died. He's already dead.
Oh,
Aunt Muriel's the
oh
one
yeah,
who
Aunt
shows up.
Muriel. Okay,
They're
sorry.
talking about their uncle and how he was always so great at weddings, but he's already dead. Um,
Yes.
and then we
Eh,
get to see the loveliness that is Aunt Muriel,
Oh yeah.
just screaming and yelling at everybody and just being a general not fun person to be around. Um,
I don't know where I would be without y'all discussing this. I would like people would be like, wait, these things never happen in these books. Like you get fun Uncle Bilius at Fleur and Bill's wedding, and like, no, he wasn't there. He wasn't there.
yeah,
Then
he's
they
already dead.
talked about him.
Yeah, they did
Um,
talk about him. And then one big thing for this chapter, Harry is disguised as some random redheaded kid from the neighboring town.
Barney.
For his protection and for the protection of all the guests.
Yes, he is Barney Weasley,
Yes.
but somebody calls him Barry, which is
Muriel calls him
so
Mary.
yes, which is so close to Harry, which
Yeah.
is funny. Oh, you're Barry? Yeah. Yeah, I'm Barry.
Yeah,
Uh
he is disguised.
Before we meet Aunt Muriel, though, Crumb, well, maybe during
The Crumb comes in
Crumb.
last.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Crumb comes in. Yes. So Crumb comes in, but he comes in before Harry and Aunt Muriel notice Ginny's cleavage. It's like, Aunt
Yeah,
Muriel notices it, and then Harry's like, "Oh, okay."
Harry is a 17-year-old boy. Um,
Yes.
but no, so yeah, Crumb comes in. We haven't seen Crumb since book 4. Um, but it does make sense that he would show up. Obviously, he was the other Triwizard champion with Fleur.
Hmm.
So, and they make it pretty obvious that Fleur invited him, not the Weasley side.
Not Hermione.
Yes, not Hermione, if Fleur invited him.
Right. Right. Specifically not Hermione, because
Yeah.
Ron was like, "Wait, why is Crumb here?" So, uh, Yeah, so going back to Uncle Bilius real quick, he said, but before he went loopy, he was the life and soul of the party, said Fred. He used to down an entire bottle of fire whiskey, then run onto the dance floor, hoist up his robes, and start pulling bunches of flowers out of his.
And it cuts out.
Yeah.
Yes, he
And
was.
he was never married. So that was
Yes.
is that Muriel's brother?
Um,
Or did we find out?
I don't think we find out the direct relation. So Muriel, so they call her Aunt Muriel. So I know that it's Molly's side of the family. It's from the Pruitt side. And so she's Molly's aunt. And then Molly also had two brothers who were killed in the first Wizarding War with Voldemort. But no, I don't think we ever fully, at least not at this point, we have not gotten a full family tree on the
The
Weasley
Weasleys?
slash Pruitt
Gotcha.
side.
Oh. So moving on to Crumb, he's talking to Mr. Lovegood Xenophilius, who is wearing Grindelwald's symbol.
And this is one
Or
of the first
so.
things we're hearing of Grindelwald.
Yes. It's
Except
first
in
time.
except in Dumbledore's historic defeat of
Oh,
Grindelwald.
yes, yes. Crumb's wand is made by Grigorovich, at which point Harry is like, then connects the dream to the wand maker. He's like, oh, that's what it was.
And it's
And
another wand maker.
yes, so he's like, oh no. Now there's two wand. We already knew Ollivander was missing. Harry, I don't think knows that Ollivander was with. Um, he doesn't know Voldemort has Ollivander.
No, he knows because he sees it in that vision that Voldemort has Ollivander. So Harry knows that Voldemort is collecting wand makers. So he knows that there's something vitally important about wands.
Which vision?
So when a couple chapters back, Harry has the vision where Voldemort is yelling at Ollivander of you told me another wand would work. Like, why was I not able to kill him? Why did his wand
Okay.
defend him?
I
So
couldn't remember that was a vision or if that was just a non POV
no,
or non
it's
Harry POV. So
it's a vision because we have that moment of his scar turns blazing hot and he's in intense pain and he sees the vision of Voldemort's anger cracks through his mental defenses. So he knows that he has Ollivander, and now he's making this connection with another wand maker of Grigorovich's, and so he's starting to realize that something about wands is incredibly important to Voldemort right now.
so the Grindelwald symbol. So Grindelwald. This is a symbol. I recognized it at once. Grindelwald carved it into a a wall. Sorry, a wall at Durmstrang, but he was a pupil there. So Grindelwald went to Durmstrang. And then some idiots copied it in onto their books and clothes, thinking to shock, make themselves impressive. But until those of us who had lost family members to Grindelwald taught them better. So I kind of feel here that Rowling, she almost sets this up for the potential and inevitable expansion of the Wizarding world.
Yes, because at this point, the seventh book has been released, and by the time the seventh book has been released, the first, I think, three, maybe four movies have come out.
Right.
So at this point, she does have the thought of, okay, I already told them that this was the last Harry Potter book, but she might have the thought of how can we kind of expand this world.
Yeah. But he might come into play later in the book. I don't remember. We'll see. Harry reveals himself to Doge. So he says, "Hey, I'm Harry. I'm not Barney." So he can talk about Dumbledore. And then Muriel joins in.
Yeah.
She doesn't know that it's Harry, though. Can't wait to read. She can't wait to read Skeeter's book. And then she talks of Dumbledore's sister Ariana being a squib and hidden away.
Which is not confirmed, but is the main theory.
It's not confirmed in the book, or
No, it's not. So, because Doge is sitting there and he's like Mira's like, oh, she had to have been a squib. She wasn't allowed out. She was hidden. And he's like, no, they did, it wasn't she wasn't a squib. Like the common theory is
is that
that
she was a
she
squib?
was squib, but
Because it
it's
makes
never
sense.
confirmed. Yeah, the Dumbledore's never confirmed that.
Yeah, and so at which point Muriel and Doge start arguing about Dumbledore. Harry finds out that Dumbledore used to, at this point, finds out that Bathilda Bagshot is still alive and living in Godric's Hollow. Asks about that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, Dumbledore used to live there too." He's like, "What? Why did he never tell me that?" Harry was born, and his first year of his life was in
Was it?
Godric's Hollow, so his parents were there, and et cetera, et cetera. And he's like, Harry is starting to wonder, like, how close was I really to Dumbledore? He didn't tell me a whole lot about himself.
Yeah.
And the chapter ends with um, a Patronus, Kingsley's Shacklebolt's Patronus coming down and announcing that the Ministry has fallen, Scrimgeour is dead, and they are coming. So I when was it established that Patronuses could essentially act as familiars?
It's not established that they can act as familiars, but they're sort of seen as just like a representation of the light in your soul. Um, and you have to be very powerful because even Hermione says a little bit later, I think in this next chapter that we're going into, Ron asks, were you able to figure out how to do that, the message with the Patronus? So it's something that is known that it can be done, but I think it's a very complex piece of magic, and you have to be very powerful to do it. And I think you also have to have a pretty powerful hold on your Patronus. Because if you remember in the fifth book, they talk about when they're starting to learn how to cast the Patronus, it's usually just like a silvery mist at first
Right.
until you can control that magic.
Everybody was amazed to find out that Harry had conjured a corporeal Patronus.
So it's one of those pieces of magic you just have to have a lot of control over. And at that point, you might be able to use it because you see it now. Kingsley's able to use it. And I believe we see it in this next chapter we're going to. Arthur Weasley's also able to do it.
Okay. Speaking of the next chapter, a place to hide. So it starts off with Hermione disapparating the three of them to Tottenham Court Road. And they're like, well, why here? She goes, I don't know. It was just a road I thought of. Like, it's away from everything.
Yeah, she brought them specifically to the Muggle world.
Yes.
She did not bring them anywhere in the Wizarding world. She brought them to the Muggle world.
And so they go into, is it a tea shop?
It's like, yeah, just a general cafe. Like they describe it as very grimy.
Yeah, it's just some place to go and sit and talk. And
Harry's under the invisibility cloak at this point.
Yes, Harry is under the invisibility cloak. So it looks like just Ron and Hermione, and they notice Harry notices two odd-looking fellows that walked in and sat. I think one of them was the blonde one he recognized from the end of the
Department of
sixth
Mysteries.
book. No, wasn't it the blonde one that came up to
So the blonde one, I believe, isn't the blonde one Dolohov?
Yes. I
So
think.
Dolohov was at the Department of Mysteries in the fifth book.
Okay. So neither of them were the ones that were at the top of the tower in the castle.
They may have been as well.
Okay.
There was they're the Death Eaters. Multiple of them are going to appear in different spots, but because it's known that um, at one point Hermione battles Dolohov in the Department of Mysteries. But remember, they said that Hermione's back is to the door and she keeps glancing over her shoulder. She doesn't like that her back's to the door. So she doesn't see Dolohov enter because she
Gotcha.
would have recognized him instantly.
Yeah. So they attack and from under the Harry casts a spell before they do from underneath the cloak. My words are not coming out right now.
And he's trying to take Lupin's advice. He's trying to not use Expelliarmus. He's trying to at least stun them. So he does hit the first person with a Stupefy. He does stun them. He knocks them out.
And then
And then is trying to go after the second one.
yes, and Hermione does a Petrificus Totalis on the second one, and then she tried to do a Diffindo.
She
But
tried to cut the
hit
ropes that
Ron.
the Death Eater had put at Ron.
Yeah, and ends up cutting Ron. Yeah, here it says Harry picked up his wand and climbed over all the debris to where the large blonde Death Eater was sprawled across the bench. I should have recognized him. He was there the night Dumbledore died, he said. He turned over the darker Death Eater with a foot. The man's eyes moved rapidly between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. That's Dolohov, said Ron. I recognize him from old wanted posters. And then the other guy is Thorfinn Rawl. So Rawl is mentioned here because later on, uh, Rawl is being Harry gets a vision
Of him being
excuse me.
interrogated by Voldemort.
Yes, and then uh, I highlighted it, but Rawl he ordered another Death Eater to continue to kind of torture Rawl. So it's kind of important. It's like, oh, okay, this is what he has his minions torture his other minions when they don't do good. Like that's a good way to like have them not plot against you.
Yeah. It's
So
more of those fear tactics. He has Voldemort uses every fear tactic he can.
yeah. So then they're talking. It's like, okay, we can't just like kill them. So they devise a plan to obliviate them and the waitress, clean up the cafe, and then like leave. So it looks like they just like nothing
Woke up
happened.
there.
Yeah. And then
But
they go out and
it's to be known that the Muggle cafe person also got hit with spells and they also had to obliviate her.
yeah,
Which that
yeah.
should have triggered some sort of alarm with the ministry that magic was being used in front of a Muggle.
But Scrimgeour is dead, and I don't think
And
they're
Thicknees is the new
monitoring
minister.
everything yet. Do it.
Well, yeah, Thicknees is now the minister, which is the one that they have Imperiused.
Did we
So
find that out yet?
I thought that that's what they were discussing in the first one of that, like Thicknees is going to be kind of like taking over once they're able to get Scritchmore out. So I mean, no, it's not explicitly said at this point, but we're assuming that Thicknees has stepped into the role of minister. Because that is what Voldemort's plan was.
Okay. That was weird. My AirPods picked up the name of the iPhone person from you talking.
Weird. So now they're trying to figure out how were they found, which we find out later, much later in the book, how they were found. But right now they're just they don't trust anywhere. They're going to the safest place they can think of.
which is Grimmauld Place. They separate and go back to Grimmauld Place.
And then they find all of the booby traps that Mad Eye Moody set up for in case Snape came back. Which, when you really think about what those booby traps are, they're kind of terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Well, I didn't highlight any of them. One of them sounded like Moody, right?
Yeah, Moody, it's like a disembodied Moody's voice saying Severus Snape. And then also the remnants of a tongue tie curse hitting them. But remember, Moody is now dead, so his enchantments are not holding the same weight anymore. And then we see the like ghostly vision of made out of like the dust of dead Dumbledore charging toward the door, toward where Snape would be. So yeah, great start to their evening. They arrive at Grimmauld Place and are hit with these booby traps. Luckily, they seem to know that they were booby traps. That they knew Moody had booby trapped the place.
Yeah. So before they go there, I highlighted this. I didn't see it until now, but Ron struggled for a moment before managing to extract his wand from his pocket. It's no wonder I can't get it out, Hermione. You packed my old jeans. They're tight. His wand.
We're gonna skip over that.
There's so many like innuendos in here that are just like,
Yes. But yes,
but
then Hermione does a hominum revelio, realizes there's no other people in the house, and that they're as safe as they can be for the moment.
and then this is they camp out in the same room. They decided to camp in the same room. Harry's scar is hurting because Voldemort is angry. He's just like, I don't know what he's angry about, but he's just angry.
And then that's when he has the vision of
Yeah.
Rawl getting tortured, so he realizes.
Yeah, Draco is actually the one that's forced to torture Rawl.
Which, and you can tell he does not like. I think it's said that like he's pale, like he doesn't. He's scared. Yes, and Draco's scared.
He's like, I don't want to be here anymore, and
but he has
this
no
is
escape.
scary
It's
shit.
literally his house. There's nowhere he can go. But then we find the Arthur Weasley's Patronus comes through, lets them know that they are safe, but to not contact them, that everybody that was at that wedding is being watched.
Yeah, family safe. Do not reply. We are being watched.
Yes. So that kind of calms Ron down a little bit in that, okay, the family's okay, but they are being watched and they need to, it's essentially telling them that they're on their own.
Yeah.
Which, considering they'd have nowhere to start looking, where they're they're almost desperate at this point to figure out how to move forward, what to do. Harry's slowly starting to get angry at Dumbledore at this point of, why didn't you leave me more instructions? Why did I not know what was going on? Why did you not tell me more about yourself and how all this plays into it? He's starting to get frustrated with Dumbledore.
Yeah. Which moves us. I know you've got to be going soon. So last chapter, we are at Creature's Tale. So Harry wakes up and explores Grimmauld Place by himself. He doesn't want to wake the other two because they look so peaceful. Like, he surmises they might have fallen asleep holding hands.
Oh.
He specifically goes into Sirius's room. He finds the letter to Sirius from Lily, which is cut
the
off.
first half of the letter.
Yeah, it's cut off, so he doesn't know. It ends with, I don't know how much to believe, actually, because it seems incredible that Dumbledore blank.
Yes. But also in that letter, the name Bathilda Backshot is brought up again.
Yes.
We realize that she is also probably, if not a neighbor, very close by to them. She knew and doted on Harry as a baby. This name keeps being brought up. She is obviously there. The author is setting this person up to be a person of importance.
Yes. Yes. We, we see he finds the picture later on of him on a little broomstick chasing the cat, terrorizing the cat. Hermione catches up with Harry after worrying, like that he was gone. He shares the letter and shares his concern that Dumbledore wasn't who Harry knew. Then shares Muriel's stories of Dumbledore. Then they go into Regulus's room, at which point it clicks. It's on their way to breakfast, and it clicks that RAB, which is the initials on the letter inside of the locket they recovered from the cave, was Regulus Arcturus Black, which is Sirius's brother. And so they use the Alohomora charm to unlock the door, go in. That room was searched. So Sirius's room was searched by somebody digging through, trying to find a lot of stuff. So they surmised that whoever was there was trying to find the locket.
Trying to find the locket or just kind of ransacking the place.
Right. And so they go into Regulus's room, to find out that Harry notices that or sees a picture of a Quidditch team, and Regulus was on the Quidditch team, but the position in the picture that Regulus was in, Harry recognized that was the position a seeker would sit for a picture. He's like, "Oh, he's got to be a seeker," and they're like, "How do you know that?" And he's like, "I think he's a seeker."
That's where he would be. Yeah.
And they search for the locket. After not finding the locket, Harry summons Creature, who tells his story of going into the cave. And then Harry orders Creature to find Mundungus.
Yes. And so this is why I mentioned earlier, because we did find out in these first 10 chapters that Mundungus is a little skeevy. He's the one who ransacked the house and stole a bunch of stuff because he was one of the secret keepers. He knew where the house was. I don't think he was looking particularly for anything. He was probably just looking for valuables and stuff to sell off.
Yeah, and we knew that he had already done it before.
Yeah.
So
we find out that Mundungus has stolen all of Creature's little black family treasures. And he tells his horrible story, and we find out what happened to Regulus. And then we also find out in that same moment, Regulus was also only 17 when all this happened. When he realized what Voldemort was doing, he sacrificed himself in order to remove the locket from its location and to hopefully get Creature to destroy it, which Creature is unable to do because he doesn't know what magics will destroy a Horcrux. Or that it's even a Horcrux. Like, that's the thing, is I don't think Regulus knew what it even was. He just knew it was important and needed to be destroyed.
right. In this section, I don't know if you listened to any of the other episodes, like Chris and I, when we discussed any of the Harry Potter books. So Chris and I got into a discussion on it was actually a two-part question. Who was more powerful, Dumbledore or Voldemort, and who was more clever, Dumbledore or Voldemort? Here, with Creature's Tale, it says, of course, Voldemort would have considered the ways of house elves far beneath his notice, just like all the purebloods who treat them like animals. It would never have occurred to him that they might have magic that he didn't. So, not in regards to that question specifically, But Chris also pointed out that Voldemort just seriously mismanaged his minions and his power and things. So he's like, for whatever reason, he's like, I need a house elf to do this. He told Regulus, I need a house elf to do this because they have magical abilities and I don't give two shits about them. It's going to be torture. And what do I care about a house elf and their feelings?
But also he felt that almost that a house elf was less than, like, if if Regulus told him you have to stay there and do whatever Voldemort tells you, that a house elf couldn't say no, the house elf couldn't leave, he couldn't defend himself, whereas he might have had much more of a fight from one of his wizard followers.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And this is the first, so when Creature is first introduced, we're like, oh, this is a crotchety. I don't care about him. He's sick. And then we see here, like, we get that, like, Creature's not really a villain, but he's broken.
He's a product of his environment.
Yeah, he's broken. And here we see why he's broken. It kind of makes Harry feel for him. And I think Harry even talks about, it's like, oh, okay. They talk about, you know, how Harry, or not Harry, how people treat Creature and how Creature responded to certain people. Like Sirius treated Creature bad. So Creature didn't like Sirius. Like, but like his Sirius's mom and Regulus, they both treated, and Bellatrix, they all treated Creature normally. So he
Yeah.
felt
Or at least not
devoted.
outwardly cruelly.
Correct. So he was more susceptible to them and like less wanting to do anything for Sirius. And I think as a byproduct, Harry as well.
Yeah. But we do also, and we have the thought now of, okay, so Creature is the Black family house elf. Now, granted, Harry was left everything by Sirius, but it does also leave you up to the vulnerability of where they are, in that Bellatrix Lestrange and Narcissa Malfoy are still able to kind of call on Creature as well. So it sort of gives you the thought of, okay, maybe they're not the safest at Grimmauld Place. Maybe Creature is sort of a vulnerable point in their defenses.
But also by extension, Andromeda could also call on Creature.
Well, yeah, I guess technically, yeah, she could. I don't even think she would think to do so. But, and also
Yeah.
her house has, well, yeah, her house has all the protections on it, but as is stated, when he's able to leave the cave, most wizard protections don't count against house elves.
Yeah, they mentioned that it's like because the house elves could apparate and disapparate into Hogwarts as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, so we get a lot of information about Creature. We find out that Mundungus probably stole the locket to sell off. And that's where we leave, is them trying to go find, they get their first lead on what to do, and that is go find Mundungus Fletcher.
yeah, and I will say I actually went and looked it up because they talk about here. Excuse me. They talk about the locket and the fact that the last time they were searching through all the stuff, they tried to open the locket that they found in Regulus's room in book 5, and I was like, no, they didn't. And I went back, and it was just like one portion of a sentence where it's like, and they found a locket that they couldn't open up. It's
Yep.
like, oh, okay.
The
along
tiniest
along
little,
and they mentioned the little music box too in here, which apparently has a sleepy spell, a lullaby spell on it. So whenever it's playing, they start to fall asleep. So, all right. Any last thoughts on this section? these 10 chapters?
I think over the next section of chapters, we're going to see a lot more. I don't want to say clarity because I feel like they spend a good chunk of time confused. But we're going to start seeing things progress a lot more quickly. Because remember, the books progressively got longer and longer and longer, and then suddenly the 7th book is only like 300 something pages. So they put a lot into these chapters. So it's a lot to unpack, but there's a lot in these chapters now. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more chaos.
Yes. And so the next section, we'll be reading chapters 11 through chapter 20. So chapter 20 is titled Xenophilius Lovegood. That will be the last chapter we discuss for next week's episode. So if you've made it this far, first of all, Emily, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here and discussing this book. I am highly interested in the next 3 conversations we have with this book. It's been fun having different people come on and discuss books. So you always get different people's perspectives and different energies coming on. And so this is actually the longest you and I have sat and talked. For sure in a continuous time. I'm not even sure we've talked this much, just taken all of our other conversations and put them all together. But hey, it's been fun. And for the listeners, viewers, if you made it this far, click like, click follow, share it, whatever. All those things are free. And, it gets this into people's, especially if you share it, it gets it into the view of other people that might enjoy these things and these conversations. And it helps us out. We do this not for money, but just because it's fun to do. And you get to talk to people, right? Like, who wants to sit in a room and just not talk to anybody? Everybody yearns for some kind of connection. So if you can find something like that you're really passionate about or really like, you have a fandom or a hobby about, and you could talk about it with somebody, it's fun. Or if you can listen to people talk about it, then it also gives you, some connection there. So do those things. Go check out our sponsor, Mudcat Whiskers, at www.mudcatwhiskers.com, and join us next week for chapters 11 through 20. So I'll see you next week, Emily.
See y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.